That must have sounded good. Can't catch a break, and then there are moments of the show where like the whole thing is Spitfire, and you're like,
Welcome to Beautiful Tornado, Episode 5 with Sarth Calhoun and Dom Buffard. This week we hang out with Bryan Senti, a musician, composer, and producer from New York, now working in Hollywood. We talked about Platonic ideals, metric modulation, beta blockers, and the joy of performance.
And like during a big moment, and you're like, you know, like you were getting notes right until the last second.
What do you mean by Spitfire?
Like Spitfire audio, which is great sample library. I just posted today that I bought everything again because they fucked me up. They put everything on sale, and you know it is.
Oh, you did
great.
it. You did it.
I did it. I did it, and then it crashed. The site crashed because I'm sure every idiot like me bought it, and then you know, because it's a good sale or whatever, and then we want to get ahead for when things open back up or whatever. So, you know, capitalism mentality.
So tell the people who are listening, like, why you're using Spitfire as like a standard, and for my education also, why do you use Spitfire as your sort of go-to example?
Yeah, I think they're classy. That's a classy library. You know, they're recording in really great rooms like Air. I think the performers are from like the London Sinfonietta. I'm gonna probably misspeak, but some really great players, and everything is done in a kind of more honest way. Like a lot of things are a little bit more of an honest recording, where things sound libraries from the past like immediately went to some sort of very varnished sound, whether it was like something that was going to be epic or just something that, like, you know, just didn't play well, you know, in any kind of literal.
Do you mean it's raw? Do you mean it's more raw?
It's a little bit more raw. It's got more functionality. Yeah, and it's recorded really well. So it's become kind of a standard, or the standard, and I don't think I'm misspeaking here, for demoing and also for stuff that's going to be final, because it's the closest thing you can get to the real thing without recording it. That said, as a string player myself, like the other things,
you get kind of like a sort of a cumulative effect of things, don't you? When sort of kind of production values start to reduce in anything, they tend to reduce all over, don't they? And then you get this kind of compound effect where things just start to look and sound cheaper, and it just, I don't know, things don't engage the same way unless it's supposed to be trashy. But
yeah, well, this is the thing too. I think you create such a, you know, high level storyline, or, you know, high level production value expectation, and then when you step off of that, it's like you see the green screen. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh shit.
I mean, it's about knowing who you are, though, right? And who you're working with. I mean, collaborating is that. So it's you know what product you're making. You know, you know what the vibe is. Is it a sort of like clumsy, lower production value vibe, and then you can go with that. But you have to go with what you're going with, and also with your collaborators. Like, there are people who, frankly, are better sometimes if you push them or don't give them quite enough time. You know,
yeah, that's true.
Get like a rough edge on them, and then there are other people who, like, really, man, you got to give them the space that they need to do their thing.
Right.
And
yeah, I would agree with that. I also just think, like, when you're pushing somebody and you're in an electronic medium, because like the analog synth is the final audio essentially, you have more time. But if you're pushing something that's like orchestra, you know, just because of the mechanism of what it takes to record orchestra, it's problematic.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's a built-in lag there, right?
There's a built-in lag.
So what's the video? Is it Ex Mica?
So this is like just a fun personal project of mine, where my backstory is that I'm a violinist and a classical musician, and but I have this side project called Ex Mica where I get to rap and be totally ridiculous and say shit it's not even dangerous, but whatever, you know, some level of inappropriate, and so it's a fun thing. And so this video that I've been working on, this video with this company called Salem X. I just looked them up, SELAMX Studio out of Berlin. And I don't know if you don't know them. These people are just, they're very freaky, they're cutting edge, and they do crazy shit, and so they're fun to work with.
Nice.
So this is just a work in progress right now.
All right, so you guys see this up?
Yeah, I can see it,
Yep.
man.
All right, cool. Let's check it out.
All right.
Kismet, you the kid, ketamine, internet, live with this, crazy shit, give it up, music, I don't know, video, living in Chris's house, she ain't home, you don't know, Chris's blood, we go. Little people never wanna know, famous people never gonna show, even though you wanna come and get it, boring world's never gonna slow. Little people never wanna know, famous people never gonna show, even though you wanna come and get it, boring world's never gonna slow. Sleeping, racist comments, creeping, sister lost in trees and birthday losing meaning, Christmas Christmas stealing, that's all kind of feeling. Why you chasing meaning? Why you chasing meaning? Why you chasing meaning? Why you chasing she ain't home, you don't know, who's that, we go. I don't know, you see me bleeding, hearts be leaving, burning as you feeling, even thoughts you stealing, even though you bleeding, words be short of healing. Why you chasing meaning? Why you chasing meaning? Chasing meaning. Why you chasing meaning?
Wow. That is sick, man. Shit, man, that is so good. That's the latest Ex Mica stuff, is it?
Yeah, I mean, not everything's going to be that angry.
Right, that is fucking cool, man.
It's really
is it just?
fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks.
is it just you, Ex Mica? I forgot.
Yes, but I work with my my friend Justin Moshkevich. He's like an amazing mixer who I like work with on film projects. So he comes in and gives some production help as well, and
Right.
and my assistant also helped a little bit with that as well. His name's Ivan. I can't pronounce his last name. I don't want to ruin his last name. Sorry, but it's
Ivan the assistant.
It's Ukrainian last name. There's a lot of consonant letters right there. I'm not gonna.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that track. I started that track actually because my buddy Justin had asked me to create a track for Malad Rodriguez, this is this is how funny music can be. You know, Mala Rodriguez is this really like a famous Spanish rapper, female Spanish rapper, and but she does a lot of like straight on like Spanish rap, and you know, and this was a little bit too. I think this was a little too crazy for that level of down and dirty rap that she does, which can like edge towards trap and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's just funny. Because it was kind of a work for hire in the beginning, I kind of set out to do something that was like kind of complicated, like have a 12 beat phrase, make sure there was like a lot of metric modulations in there, like the phrasing in there, like the kind of, just from a musical standpoint, the phrasing in there is kind of like complicated, in at least in terms of like rap pop music. So that was kind of the beginning of that track.
Right. Wait, so give an example. So explain like one complicated aspect so I understand what you're talking about. So what do you, so you're saying there's like a 12 beat phrases?
So there's 12 beat phrases. It's in 12 beats. And then there's like that bridge where you hear the wood block. I guess that's you know, where I'm saying, why are you chasing meaning? You know, again, being like a violinist and being a pianist, like I just played, it was like while I was doing this, I was like on tour with Leslie Feist, speaking of very different kind of music. You know, I didn't want any like normal sounds. I think the drum machine largely is this Tanzbar, which is this drum machine made in Germany.
Can you say that again?
It's called the Tanzbar. I'll pull it out. Just this little like bleepy bloopy kind of this little bad boy here. Right. Which, I was working with Dustin O'Halloran, and I went to that famous, you must know this store.
The place in Berlin.
Yeah, like that famous synth place that's like right at
it's like Cottbusser.
It's like by Oranienstrasse.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know. Actually, I've never been in it, but I know of it. Yeah, it's the.
I walked by that place. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, God,
what's the name of that? About getting an amp there or something.
Yeah, that place is. That place is really great. Like that's like the equivalent. Like I didn't realize that like we had like Perfect Circuit and other things here that are kind of similar, but that place is really down and dirty. Right at I forget the name of it, but
isn't it a Cottbusser Tour?
Cottbusser Tour. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so
that place is really famous. Modular stuff, isn't it?
It has great modular stuff. So so I use that, and then I use my little modular unit here, you know, to like create a lot of the synth sounds for it.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, no, it's kind of like a test for me.
I really liked it. It's one of those things where there's a you know, well, first of all, like the bass sound is it's really great. Right? It's a really full bass. It sounds really wonderful. And then like the way that it can drive so hard without a lot of, there can be times where there's no snare or hat or anything like that happening, and yet there's still, you never have a feeling of any loss of momentum or clarity of what's going on. You know? Yeah,
there's no snare.
Yeah, is that what's going on? There's no snare at all.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. Like just like you know, see if you can pull it off without a snare. You know, like you know.
But then there'll be another drum. There's another drum pattern that has a lot more high end that comes. You know, the one that's spatialized very differently.
Yes.
Right, and it comes in for a little while.
Yeah. There's a heartbeat sound in there that it's from the Tempest.
Yeah, and I thought that the production is really interesting. Actually, I feel like, so when we were talking on Friday with a couple other people, there was this whole discussion of my mixes where there was this notion of that I don't obey like any concept of things being in the same space.
Yeah.
Is it the door?
Mm-hmm.
Was that a threatening doorbell ring?
What just happened just now?
Yeah. You in some kind of trouble that we should know about or shouldn't know about?
That I don't want to admit what that was.
Okay.
All right. So
I know you've seen this, Dom, but Sarth, have you ever listened to or have you ever seen like Hypernormalization or Adam Curtis documentaries?
No. So what's that all about?
No, well, he's just this amazing like BBC documentarian who does really amazing music supervision. And actually this music video kind of is a little Adam Curtis-y in many respects. There he has this one documentary called Hypernormalization, which essentially speaks to the idea of normalizing the public through confusion. You know, he like one of the examples that he talks about, I feel like, is like Putin. He would support people who were for and against policies of his, so that you didn't know if you were like in both cases you were essentially supporting him, and because of that you just gave up supporting anyone at all. And the reason why I think that's interesting and kind of relates to this moment right now is that everyone is in this kind of epic confusion because there hasn't been kind of like adequate leadership, or at least cohesive, cogent leadership across states, across boundaries. So everyone's just making it up as they go. We're all tasked with being as careful as we think is appropriate, because you don't even know. You don't. What do you do? I don't really know.
Well, it's also we're also getting everybody in the entire world, to a greater or lesser degree, is getting a crash course in like risk and making decisions under and with inadequate information and in ambiguous situations. And like so much of life is that, but I think that we always want to think somehow that that science isn't like that, or that medicine isn't like that. When, you know, doctors are making guesses all day long, you know, they're like, I don't know, it's probably this. They don't say it that way, but they're actually thinking, I don't know, it looks kind of like this. Let's just try to treat him for it and see what happens. It's actually what doctors are often thinking. But we want to think, you know, that they just know what's wrong with you and they know what the answer is. Same thing when scientists publish a study. I think a lot of people, if you don't follow this, or you know, the communities who talk about this a lot, how wrong almost every study is.
Yeah.
something that's become very talked about over the past 10 or 15 years, but I think most people haven't needed to think about this until we started being given all this information and then realizing that you still can't figure anything out, and that more information often just makes you more and more and more confused.
The thing with homeopathy, people always seem to fall back on is that it worked for my dog, so it can't be a placebo effect.
So, hey, Dom, should we hear one of the tracks that you sent over or something like that?
Yeah. Well, I was actually thinking I wouldn't mind to just play Gun Life, Emperors of Rome, because I'm on that and so is Bryan, playing violin on it.
So, shall I play it?
Would you?
With the shadows behind you, walk with your face to the sun. In a room full of ghosts, there's a t-shirt wrapped around a gun. And if anyone cries, well, baby, it's not your problem. It's a place way up high and a space where the few become one. And I have written songs for you, committed wrongs in your name, fire, fire across the sky. And even when you hold on, somehow time just moves on. Felt my heart break for the millionth time. Don't know where you're going to, wherever your gun life takes you to. Don't know what I'm gonna do. I guess I'm the same as you. Well, the morning comes and the sea's as gray as the sky, and the sand on the dunes is as cold as the tears in her eyes. And I remember you as the fireworks crossed the blue, as we sat down and set fire to our smiles. And nothing could contain you, no, nothing could persuade you to sacrifice your gun life for a while. Don't know where you're going to, wherever your gun life takes you to. Don't know what I'm gonna do. I guess I'm the same as you. And if I could somehow dream of colors I have never seen, I'd burn all these memories. I guess I'm the same. I guess I'm the same as you. Don't know where you're going to, wherever your gun life takes you to. Don't know what I'm gonna do. I guess I'm the same as you. And if I could somehow dream of colors I have never seen, I'd burn all these memories. I guess I'm the same. I guess I'm the same as you. You.
I love that little bit in the middle, right?
Yeah. That video is really nice, man.
Nice, man. It looks a little bit jerky coming over the thing. It runs a bit smoother than that, but
Yeah, it's a little slower. Yeah.
I got to see it without that.
Oh, really? Right, yeah.
I mean, I know the song. I think I've heard that song before once or twice. I was just really appreciating, again, I was just appreciating the production quality. Maybe that's just the trip I'm on today. Just like really enjoying the mixes. Maybe I'm just liking my headphones or something, but I was just loving the soundscape and the balance of things. And
cool.
And then that animation of that I haven't seen before. And I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. Rita does a lot of stuff. She does very kind of handmade type work, and
I'd love to know exactly how she did that. Like, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I mean,
but we were very lucky with that because we actually recorded the vocals, drums, and guitar. There's no snare on that one either.
Yeah,
I
love the drum sound on that thing. It's crazy.
Yeah, and you know what? We actually we don't have that drum anymore. We did get a marching drum. We drove halfway across the country to some guy had he had a marching drum, but he had some toms as well. But he customized it to make it a kick drum. Anyway, we went and we got this thing. It just sounds so good. I drilled holes in it and put legs on it, so that's what Ali plays like in gigs, and it sounds really dum. But we were lucky because we got to basically with Alex Silver. We got to record most of the album in Hansa, in Hansa Ton Studio in Berlin. Yeah, so that was just like the best room.
How big is that room?
It's big. It's pretty big. It's a good size, man. I mean, it's I couldn't really say in feet or whatever, but it's a good size, and it kind of looks like how I imagine Ike Turner's living room to look. It's kind of 70s furniture, leather furniture and stuff that looks really cool. Yeah, and obviously they've got great gear and
yeah, but to me it's like one of the things that speaks to the production value of that track that can't be replicated is the space that the drums occupy.
Yeah.
You can Valhalla the shit out of that thing, and you ain't gonna get that sound without that space.
Yeah. I don't know if it was that track or another one, but there was one of them I remember that Alex came in. Alex produced it, but so Ali's on drums, I'm playing guitar, and there were live takes. but we had Alex was standing with the tambourine like several meters off mic, just like the other, like basically what you're saying. He was at the end in the room, but like way over there. Shing, so you got this beautiful kind of indirect shing, so.
But did you use a Deca tree? Where, not to get technical, but
no, he was just
technical.
A Deca tree.
What's what a Deca tree is?
Yeah, tell me what a Deca tree is.
No, I mean, you'd have some sort of like stereo plus a center kind of mic set up right at the back.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I think we did. Yeah.
The reason why it sounds like that is because it doesn't sound, you can have a really beautiful mic and a really beautiful signal, but there's something about it, even if it's panned and even if you do some bus trickery, it sounds like it's coming from one place, and that there's something about this track that has the feeling of a room that is undeniable.
Yeah,
right. Of a natural space, organic space.
Yeah. Well, it definitely was that. Yeah. It was,
makes a difference.
It does.
Makes a difference.
And also this is the thing. I mean, just in terms of, because we all have home setups and whatnot now and stuff. And although I kind of work on whatever I'm working on and can program or produce to some extent, with the Emperors of Rome stuff, I was just like for a couple of reasons. One, because I just want to be a musician. I want to just be performing songs, and I don't want to be thinking about anything else. And also because people who know about mics and know about rooms know about them, and they do a better job on that shit. So I thought, as far as doing Emperors of Rome stuff, it was like, I don't want to be trying to produce this shit. I just want to go in there with people that know what they're doing, have good mics, know how to use them, understand the space. And that stuff is just like, I know it's undervalued, and I know like it's like, because I know people who have done amazing work in that stuff who no longer work in music because there aren't the budgets for people like that to work anymore, and to take that kind of
Right.
you know, the kind of the same kind of knowledge it takes to fly a jumbo jet, you know, kind of that's the kind of experience they have in studios and recording stuff like that. It's very, very sad that that's kind of that art is not dying, but it's a lot of people, really great people that did it don't do it anymore because somehow it's just things have moved away from that, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if there's an easy solution to that. I mean,
it's just the way things go, isn't it?
It's like, I mean, imagine, again, you know, lived in New York City for many years of my life, to have the opportunity to record something on that at that level is very expensive. You know, very complicated.
Yeah.
You know, what's the famous studio space that was like bought by Berklee School of Music, Avatar? Or
maybe.
Well, I think it's like on the west side of Manhattan, you know, and people thought they've taken over so many of those kinds of spaces, and that place is $2,000 a day. At least I recorded there once in my life for one film, and I felt like I was on hallowed ground. You know, I felt like I was in a church. It's that special.
Right.
But yeah, it's very, I don't know what the solution is to that, but I do think, you know, not to bring it back to Corona, that, you know, one positive thing maybe from the situation, among other positive things, is that there's going to be a movement maybe towards leaving, you know, some movement towards leaving the cities. And if you go into a rural place, like, you're going to be able to pull off some of this stuff. My friend Justin O'Halloran, who's an amazing Oscar-nominated composer, they couldn't figure out how to do their latest film. He was collaborating with this guy Hauschka, who's another amazing composer, doing this film called Old Guard for Netflix. And they wanted to do it at Air Studios, or, you know, and of course they couldn't do it with this situation. And his girlfriend's Icelandic, and there's this new recording setup that's like literally half an hour plane ride into the middle of nowhere of Iceland. That's where you can pull stuff off like that.
But so was violin your first instrument, man?
Yes.
So you started like when you were a little kid?
I was 3.
Were your parents musicians, or like how did that happen?
My father was a reverend, but he was also a singer. And I think it's kind of funny, like, you know, my dad passed away like a few years ago, but he was born in like 1932. So he was 50 when he had me. So he was like in Cuba, no less. So he was a Depression era kid, and he came from a family of like religious people, and people in general were just more religious back then. But I think he was a bad boy on top of that. So it's like one of those things where under normal circumstances, he would have been a performer, but because it all got messed up with fucking religion, he became a reverend, which was messy to say the least. But anyway, he was the one who kind of forced me, or I guess it's force. You can only force a 3-year-old. The 3-year-old's not going to make a conscious choice. So I think force is the right word. Forced me to play violin.
3-year-olds will choose to start something.
Will they?
Sometimes. I've noticed that, but they will definitely not follow through.
Yeah.
Anything. Right? You know,
it was like, forced to follow
I want to
through.
learn violin. Sure, that sounds amazing. I'm 3. I'm not quite sure what that even means. And like,
exactly.
you definitely get one lesson.
Exactly. I don't know what neck pain is yet. I don't know what lower back pain is.
So,
yeah.
Are you glad that he kind of made you do it?
I'm glad now. You know, which I don't, that like puts like a very Hollywood ending to what was very, you know, difficult, honestly. Like, I have a very tortured, you know, I think a lot of violinists, actually, a lot of string players have a tortured relationship with their instrument, because in order to get good at it, you have to practice a lot, and it's a very unforgiving instrument, and public's expectation of string playing is also unforgiving. So you know, I did it all through high school and studied with this lady, Pentika Kopek, which is, I guess, part of this thing called like a Pinkus Zuckerman's like collective of teachers at Manhattan School of Music. And yeah, the whole pressure of it, like just having, you know, just like getting stomach aches right before performances and just constantly trying to reach some sort of like ideal of playing, just eventually like took its toll on me, and I chose not to play it for many years, and move on to composition because I felt like there was more freedom in composition, and it may even be just like a better lifestyle, which I think it ended up being for me specifically. But
so when did you make that move, over to composition?
I started studying composition around 16, 17 at Manhattan School of Music as well. And so then when I went to college, I got a degree in composition. But the funny thing about all this is that right after we talk, I'm going to have a violin lesson at 1 p.m. with it's funny. I'm 37 now, and now that I'm like coming back to the instrument and like with newfound joy and pleasure, and yeah, I'm just happy that I never went the route of trying to do it, you know, strictly professionally. Not that I don't do it professionally now, but it's like a bonus thing that I can do rather than me being a concert violinist. Because you really have to be born to do that sort of thing. I mean, and I know that sounds cliche to say, I don't really mean it in the way that most non-musicians think about it, you know, because people think, you know, it's about you're just born with this technical gift, which of course people are born with the technical gift. Of course, that's true. But what it means to be a performer and the headspace that people have to be in order to execute what is very complicated. This is the thing, like violin is it's like it's athletic, you know, at the highest level. And I'm speaking specifically about playing like concert violin, being a soloist. And what it takes to kind of get into that headspace is something way beyond technical ability, that most people aren't prepared for. And one more thing about that is that it's funny how much the world's changed even since I was a kid. I was playing actually solo violin with Dustin O'Halloran for this show in Iceland, a part of this like Sigur Rós festival a couple of years ago. And I was like pretty nervous to play the show, and I hadn't taken like I'd been playing violin. I started playing violin for a few years before there. And I can play violin. I'm not saying that I can't play violin, but I was like, you know what, I'll go and visit some friends of mine who are like serious players, like play at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center regularly and stuff like this. And one of them is like this second violinist for the St. Lawrence String Quartet, which I think is one of the best string quartets right now in the States. And anyway, I get there and I like, you know, we talk about, you know, pronating the hand and certain technical things that I was doing and certain things that I can do to improve. And then I asked him straight up, I was like, do you get nervous? I mean, you know, like at this point in your life, do you get nervous? Yeah. You know, because I always got nervous as a kid, and I'm definitely going to be nervous for the show. And he's like, oh yeah, man. Yeah, I get nervous. He's like, yeah. And you know, I'll just take a beta blocker. And I was like, what's a beta blocker?
No way. That's like darts players.
And I was like, he's like, oh, it's something that like, you know, just kills your adrenaline, and you just have the facility of your fingers and you can kind of get through a show. And I was like,
Jesus,
when did this happen? And I kind of heard, you know, in just regular shop talk with performers about this thing, you know, and classical violin being different than playing in rock bands, which I've done as well. You know, you can have like a shot of whiskey or grab a couple, you know, a beer or whatever before you go on a show. But taking whiskey before playing classical music is risky. Risky whiskey. risky whiskey. You know, again, because of the athleticism of the music. So, you know, he opened up this whole other thing, that there's this performance enhancing drug, essentially, that a lot of classical musicians were taking. And he had found about it when he was in college. And I had just missed that moment. You know what I mean? Because I went into composition for college. So if I had been in college as a violinist, I'm sure we would be fucking taking beta blockers in the same way that kids were taking Adderall and still taking Adderall today before their exams.
You know,
over here. Go on, sorry, man.
No, I was just going to say, you know, it reminds me in the book War of Art. I don't know if you ever saw this book, but he talks about, and I get people's names confused, but I guess like Henry Fonda or something like that. I don't remember. They're saying like this guy, before he went on stage, he would vomit every single time before he did a show. And you know,
like an ayahuasca ceremony.
Yeah, it's like that's how nervous and that's how fucked. You know, Amy's just, and he his entire career. That was, you know, just the reality. And I was comparing that to I was thinking about this when I was past couple of years. I started watching football, and I was watching some game towards the end of the season. You know, this, you know, in 2019 season, and the team was way down. And it was late in the season, and really didn't matter, you know. Right. And they were going out playing so hard, and I was thinking, why are they playing so hard? I mean, it really doesn't matter, right? There's like 5 minutes left in the game, and then I saw the expression on their face, especially the quarterback, man, and he was just so much joy. And I thought, right, he take a step back, dude. He's playing in the NFL right now. Yeah, this is his dream, and he has a finite number of these that he can do. And so much of his life, like if you're a professional athlete, right? So much of the time that you spend is not doing the thing that is the fun thing that you really want to do. That if you finally are in, you know, you only get 16 games in the season or whatever, you're going to play every down, because this is what you've done your whole life for, is for this next pass or whatever, you know? And you know, when one of the things I realized when I did a bunch of touring and stuff was, wow, it's so much effort just to play for an hour and 10 minutes, maybe even every other day. And all this other stuff you're doing, you better completely go for it. And you better love it so much. Yeah. That it's worth vomiting, that it's worth ripping your knee, that it's worth taking beta blockers, that it's worth practicing for endless hours, that it's worth sitting in. And you don't, that's what I'm saying. You can't just love it. You have to love it so much. Yeah.
One of my formative things that really fucked up my performance career was like, I was in a festival. I was like 14 years old as a violinist, and I was playing like a Mozart trio with the pianist was from Russia and the cellist was from Japan. And we're playing in Amsterdam to a full crowd, 600 people.
Wow, you're 14 at this point.
I'm 14.
Wow.
And I was at that moment where I was thinking about like, how far can I remove myself from the physical experience of playing before shit really hits the fan?
Well, like disassociation.
Yeah, disassociation. And it was like kind of almost like a philosophical concept that was just coming into and trying to experiment with as a child. And I started to go so far off that I got lost. And I couldn't. I at one point in the middle of a classical concert try to ask for a measure number, like to call it measure. And they didn't speak English. And at the end of the concert, it was that.
Oh, man.
So that really fucked me up for the rest of my life.
Well, so one experience can really shape you. You know, it shouldn't be so. It shouldn't be that we're so easily shaped by one really intense experience, but it can happen, you know.
But that's trauma, isn't it?
No, it was traumatic. But then there are other like masterful, like I had not masterful, but other like moments where you power through. Like when I'm thinking of, I play this one show with Mark Ronson at the at the Royal Opera House in London, and I was playing keys for a ballet that he and Andrew White had written, and we're all on stage playing behind. It's what's it? I forget the name. Wayne McGregor, I think, is the the choreographer.
Choreography, yeah.
So we're playing backstage, dancers in front of us, and I had the music for the show like on a stand low, and I had my stage light, and and this is like a long ballet, and I'm reading the music, and it's already kind of, this is already a scary whatever kind of event, because we're it's the Royal Opera House.
Yeah, right.
And many a better piano player has played on the stage. So we rehearse, everything's going well. Opening night, we start in the black as we often do, and I hear we have click, because it's kind of a mixture of like a classical plus pop kind of a score, and the click starts, and the lights, none of the lights are on for the musicians, and we have to play the show for the first time, like the first 15 minutes of the show, before whoever is doing lighting at the front of house realizes that none of our lights are on, from memory, in the dark, with like complicated MIDI triggering, whatever. And it reminded me of childhood so bad, because when I get really nervous, I get like, I can feel it now. I get it in my left, like my back left. It's like a kidney thing. Like I must have had a kidney stone, and I'm just like, I'm like playing like this, and I'm like, I just like start leaning to my left, and like I'm like just atrophying from there. But you get through the show, and then you're on the other end of an experience.
I had the opening night of the Sonnets. I can't know if it was the opening night or it was the first preview of the Sonnets. Yeah. Because I was playing guitar through Guitar Rig, on a laptop. So I'd gone for like 6 weeks or something. Was the production period?
Yeah.
Hadn't had a single problem with the thing. Of course, literally as the lights are going down, my laptop goes black, right? And I'm like, fuck. I'm like, what? And I'm trying to kind of, I'm hitting everything, trying to get it to do something. Nothing's happening. So I think, okay, I'll turn it off. I'm trying to turn it off. It won't turn off. Just the keys are still lit up, nothing is working. And like, the lights have gone down. We're in there. It's all happening. I'm going like, fuck. Stefan Raga's looking at me like, what's wrong? I'm going, give laptop,
yeah.
And in my head, so I'm now trying to restart the thing. And then I'm mentally calculating how long I've got to get this thing up before I need an electric guitar, because the first thing is using the Spanish guitar, and then there's this in it. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I? So I'm, so I'm going through this whole thing of trying to kind of visualize the game. You're like, where are the gaps? Where's the opportunities where I can do this, where I can do that? At the same time as playing to the audience for the first fucking time. I mean? So it's like, which, to be honest, probably took my mind off that, because I was more worried about what the hell was going on.
Right.
Here, and then somehow I managed to get the thing to start, and it was just like, and and then it was okay. But it was just like, what is it? Like computers? Are they like telepathic or what?
Yeah, I don't know. It always goes wrong during a performance.
And computers, they can sense stress. I swear it.
The first tour I did with Lou Reed, it was a south of the United States tour. Most of those places he'd never actually been. Like he'd never been to Nashville his whole life. Not once,
Right.
And,
well, on purpose.
No, I mean, Nashville, that's the music capital of the world, right?
I know it is, but Lou Reed, I can't imagine in Nashville somewhere.
There were a lot of great stories from that. But we played the Beale Street Music Festival, and I had never been on a tour bus before, right? And this was like maybe like my fourth show with them or something like that. I had very little warm up, and I definitely never played a festival. And I didn't know this whole thing about festivals, no sound check. Like, it's this, it's crazy.
Line check, yeah.
Yeah, you don't get a line check. They line check for you. Just walk out on stage and start playing, right? That's my experience of it, right? So, and I'm walking out, and I've never seen a crowd this big that's pointed in my direction, right? So it's a lot of firsts. And I was doing.
What are you playing?
Live. I was playing Continuum, but I was mostly doing
nice.
live processing, right? So I'm on stage, but I'm running everybody through my Kima rig.
Thankless job, man.
Yeah, well, it's like, and so we hit the first song, and it's like an acoustic guitar number, and one of my lines was open, going into like this crazy Kima, like granular synth effect, right? You know, like granular processing. And so the guy's playing the acoustic guitar, and there's this raging torrent of it sounded awesome, but it's like happening. And I didn't notice it was me. Like that's how overwhelmed I was. And I'm saying like the whole thing was probably bad for about 5 seconds, but I mean, it felt like an eternity because I'm hearing the sound and I'm like, what the hell is that sound?
Right.
And Lou is thinking, what's new about this band? Right. And so he turns and looks right at me. And I'm like, I actually did that. So he looks at me like that. And then he turns around. And then I realize, oh, that is me. And
shit.
So the rest of the show goes off great. Right. We get back to the tour bus. And you know, like that night or the next morning, it's usually like the next morning with him. He's like, sorry, let's come up to the front. So what happened? Honestly, I had an open line going through my, you know, you immediately own it. He's like, fine, chalk it up to your first festival. You know, that was the end. Right. So I was like, that's great. So it's like 3 months later or 6 months later, I was like talking to some guy who's working as like an art handler or something. And I met him like through another guy, and I was asking him to help me out with something. So this is a guy I've never heard of, I've never met, 2 friends removed or something. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I know you. Like you were on tour with Lou. I was at the Beale Street Music Festival. Did you do something weird?" Because he turned around and looked at you, and you went like this. And it's like all that time, I had hoped that the audience, of course, didn't notice any of this, right? I mean, it was only just 5 seconds. And you think like, "Oh, come on, seriously? You random guy who didn't know me. It's not like you were fixated on me because we were friends."
Right.
Actually, that was your memory that you took away from that Lou Reed show, was me being like...
That's why you can never meet those people ever again. If I ever met anyone from that 14-year-old concert series ever, I'm sure they would remember her too. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I wasn't there.
Why don't we get another bit of music?
Yeah. What about this? You want this Turin 7K FD mix V2.wave?
Yeah.
Cool. So what is this? Yeah.
So, I was asked to do a piece for a string compilation record that must be coming out soon. Maybe in like, what day is it today? Maybe in like 5 days. I guess the end of this month. For K7 Records. And some good friends are on that compilation record, like Echo Collective. And let me make sure I'm saying everyone's name right. Simon Golf and Echo Collective, and yeah, so this is just a string piece. I guess the inspiration for it, again, in trying to find, I guess my journey. Sorry, I'll just step back. My journey with like being a string player, I guess at this point in my life, is that, you know, like I talked about before, I wasn't kind of cut out to be you know, a soloist or a string performer on a level like that, but I've experienced a lot of music, and different kinds of music, as we all have. And at this point, I kind of, in the same way that like a singer may not be great, you know, but they own like a certain sound and a certain vibe in their voice, and that's what's of value. I kind of want to transfer that to string playing, which is, you know, and it's not so much a tall order as it is an unusual order, because people have such an expectation of what strings should sound like and what performance practice is for something like violin. And to say that you can own something, you know, or play violin differently than what's socially acceptable is at least different. You know, it's definitely possible, but people don't really do it because of what people expect from string players. So anyway, with this piece, you know, playing fragilely, I and that's kind of a lot of what I do when I collaborate with people like Dustin O'Halloran, is like a very fragile kind of naked style of violin playing. And it's also similar to what I did with Dom. Like I love that kind of Western style of music. and having like a almost a little bit of bluegrass or country in the, you know, in the Johnny Cash style of country kind of vibe of playing, but bringing in some more stranger harmonies or stranger licks is kind of what I'm thinking of when I'm playing. But with this piece specifically, I was inspired by kind of Japanese ink painting. Just like I've been spending, when I go on vacation now, if we're ever lucky enough to go on vacation ever again, I loved I went to China back in May before all this craziness happened, and have been to Japan a bunch of times because we have a bunch of friends in Japan and in Korea for that matter. And I would love going to these museums where there would be like Japanese ink painting. And I wanted to maybe try out a piece where the bow, which is obviously like a brush, has hair like a brush. Each kind of melodic line was created in the spirit of like an ink painting, where like, you know, such slow motions and everything was developed from each stroke. It wasn't composed in a Western sense. Anyway, so that's kind of the inspiration for this piece.
Amazing.
Thanks, man.
That's
That's
beautiful.
the perfect. We're totally gonna put that one at the end. Like, it's so perfect.
Go out on that one.
You know what I mean? It's so perfect. It's
But
like,
the thing about them, like, I was really getting, when you're talking like marks, like with a brush, and it's like, that kind of gesture and marks and stuff.
Yeah.
It's so like, it's so strong. That
it's actually so nice to hear, to have that
that context.
Yeah.
That picture. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't always want to know something about a piece, but in that case, it
helped to draw me into the right headspace.
There's no reason not to know that.
Yeah.
It's like the story, you know what I mean? The backstory. It's really matters,
and I think it was like a fun experiment too, because it led to things that wouldn't occur in other kinds of music, or wouldn't occur in like your standard violin or string piece. Like you have it's like these gestures of like sliding and really slow slides that are in many respects non-harmonic. Like they're not necessarily a part of the harmony or the melody of a piece. They don't drive anything outside of some sort of programmatic / narrative detail that comes to life when I tell you that I'm thinking about painting. You can imagine like the Bob Frost or whatever, those like just drawing a tree like coming down or birds, like
those
gestures of birds.
Kind of like random tapping kind of things as well. It was like things were just occupying their own space, like and then like looking into a landscape or something, as things are just actions are happening within that space independently, almost felt like.
Exactly.
What was going on with the lowest voice?
The cello?
Yeah, it's like something about the way it was recorded. It really had an upright bass vibe.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I kept having to check myself, and I'm like, well, that registered, that should be cello, but I don't know. It's like the strings almost sounded like floppy in a way or something.
Yeah.
Or there was like something in how it was recorded or something in how it was played. That
was
giving it a real specific character.
Two things regarding that. One is it's played by this amazing cellist called Noah Hoffield, who lives in New York, and he's just he's a great player. He's also somebody who I asked to play this because he's like he's like a spiritual dude who's like done like ashrams in India and like not spoken for a month and stuff like this, so he can kind of delve into this vibe and kind of give something else to the experience. So I think that factored into how he played it. And then the person who mixed this is Francesco Donadello, who he's the guy who worked with Johan Johansson the whole time and Hildur, and I think what's important about, I think he's like somebody needs to write articles about that guy, because that music, like Johann's music and a lot of this like neoclassical music, like Niels Fromm's music, or a lot of that kind of music comes from this dude who just doesn't record things and doesn't mix things in a straightforward classical way, which a lot of that is happening in here. Like some string sounds like they sound like they're happening in like kind of a box. It almost reminds me of like, I listened to a bunch of like old like Indonesian or like Thai funk music, or the Ethiopiques catalog, where some of the things sound like they're being recorded in like kind of a very boxy room, but it kind of gives you this very like cool vibe, like you're actually in Thailand, like having like a Thai coffee in a random place. And he has that kind of sensibility to think outside of the box. That not everything needs to sound like it's escaping from the stage of a Deutsche Grammophon level studio. Things can sound like they're actually coming from a shack, or outside even. So those are the I think those two things factor into that sound and the sound of the rest of the piece as well.
That's awesome.
That's actually interesting, because I'd really like to hear something of yours, Sarth, and that just as kind of a point, because what you just said with the piece there, because there were certain points where things did have this kind of more ambient sound, and then I noticed moments where you had a kind of much drier kind of thing happening, which gave it this, and this thing of kind of layering as well, kind of, you know, things being, something is here, something's there, something's moving over here. It like very much like a bit, which is something which really interests me right now. And I don't think you've heard any of the stuff I've been doing, kind of electric guitar stuff I've been working on, but it was interesting hearing that, because I thought that's bizarre. There are things in this, without going to, I'm not going to go into it now, but there were things which reflected ways that I've been thinking about things and stuff I'm doing, and I thought that's really interesting. There are certain things here that I wonder are just the kind of one of these zeitgeisty things, you know, sort of things where you think, that's a similar thought to something I've been having as well, in something which is not in the most obvious of channels and stuff, but it's something about the way you were using certain rhythms, where things were just kind of like occupying space together, breaking the space, kind of. And Sarth, this is something, you know, we talked about with yours as well, with your mixing of your tracks. Is this Sarth has this thing where he'll mix things in a way where things sound like they don't belong in the same dimension as each other. They sound like they're misplaced. The logic, you know, the kind of spatial logic is completely fractured. It doesn't make sense. You know, two things aren't supposed to be here in the same place. It doesn't make sense, because
saying.
I do, because it's a really strong. It's a really strong characteristic of your play something. Just fucking play something.
Okay, I was just thinking that the thing I was thinking about playing, I have it is a mix that I kind of left off on like over a year ago, and I never really finished it off. I forgot why.
Is this from Book of? No, it's Book of Stuff.
Oh, no, I was gonna play, because now I've gotten distracted by this. But
all right, okay. This is not going to exhibit what I said at all just now, is it?
Yeah, right. Now that we've said that, right?
Wicked, man.
Nice.
That did have an example of that because the drums have this kind of like distinctly kind of room kind of sound on there, but then you got kind of program stuff up front. So yeah, pretty soon we got into what I was talking about.
Yeah. No, man, really cool track. And I think it's like, I was just thinking about like trip hop's kind of contribution to experiencing different audio spaces and that kind of dance music or, you know, down tempo music rather, that kind of first, you know, they're not the first music to experiment with that. I was like thinking like what would be the first music to experiment with that? Maybe that's like the Beatles again the Beatles, but it's definitely a place where that kind of concept evolved, where you borrowing music and sounds and different gestures from different audio spaces and genres.
Actually,
and then having it grounded.
Possibly.
Yeah, dub too.
Yeah.
So
listening to that, it made me realize that I think I want those strings to sound more like a Bond film somehow.
Yeah.
Like even more like in another space.
What are you using for this?
What I'll do.
Where are the strings from?
I don't remember now, but I think that because for a while I had no good sample libraries because I was all about just like doing stuff lo-fi or just recording my own stuff.
Right.
You know, and then processing. And then I finally started to think like, man, you just don't have enough high fidelity raw material to start your processing from. So I want to guess that either those are maybe the East West, like session string. No, like I'm guessing they're the East West Hollywood strings. I bet you they are. Because or they would have been the like the native instrument session strings, which to me don't sound like anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
it's like
whenever I use those, I'm like, why would I ever use this? But then I thought, you know, but for me, a lot of times it's just a raw material, so I don't care.
Yeah.
But you know, I can get really trapped by the sample library though, because it'll make, especially if it doesn't sound real, I'll go down some sort of like, oh, it's cool that it doesn't sound real, and I'll start writing parts for that sound and completely lose track of what I was setting out to do.
But that always seems to be, for me, your music always seems to have that kind of element to it, where it seems that you kind of got this sort of you know, always seems to me like you kind of deliberately doing this kind of you never kind of like smooth it into something. It's like you've got this kind of almost kind of like I'm deliberately going to make this stick out. You know, I'm deliberately going to make this sound a little bit kind of uncomfortable. I mean, like a lot of the stuff you did with Lou had this, you know, and we talked about this before, there seemed to be this thing where it was almost confrontational. You know, it was kind of almost like just kind of like daring people, like, I'm just going to, is this uncomfortable yet? How about this? What about if I do this to it? Is that uncomfortable yet? You know what I mean? And you'll do these kind of weird sort of things in mixes where it's kind of like, it seems like you're just kind of like seeing how far you can push something to not be a conventional.
You know, and John Zorn too, right? Like I think like talking with John, because Lou definitely, because I think that I used to really just try to balance everything in my mixes. Like everything should be balanced. We have to have all the frequencies, and nothing should be too loud, and nothing should be too, you know. And definitely Lou like push that all the time, you know.
Right.
But like John Zorn does the same. You know, he would be like, you know, sometimes you want people to like lean in, like really, like maybe they're having trouble hearing something.
Yeah.
You know, and we're always scared to do that.
Yes.
You know.
Right.
It's like, oh no, what if people have trouble hearing it? It's like, what if no one ever has trouble hearing anything?
It's funny, like, isn't it? Because the whole exercise of listening has been like, you know, the parameters of what is, you know, listening as an act has been so kind of like defined in some ways, hasn't it? And there is actually so many more things you can do with that.
Right.
Like you say, you can lean in, you can make something so it's almost inaudible. You can make things, you know, there's all sorts of things you can do to vary the listening act rather than a very kind of, I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with things being in a certain way, but it's just, there are other possibilities, ways of approaching it, aren't there? Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm really stuck on the mix for that one. I remembered now what my problem with it is, and it was bad enough that I actually cleared my whole mix and started again, which I never do. And it's like, it's those damn taikos, you know? And like, because I'm trying to do like this pattern, like a triply pattern, right? But those drums really don't lend themselves to that. So it sounds really cool by itself, and it's impossible to put into a mix without it either wiping everything out or being completely wiped out, you know, and so it is the East-West, because that's the only time I got those titles.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's like
Storm Drummer or whatever.
Yeah. And I think I finally realized that I just had to go back, that I just need to go back in and just get rid of the sustain on them.
Yeah, and just make them,
not really tychos. Yeah. I was fantasizing that we were going to get out of this whole discussion without me actually playing a track. So I wasn't actually even ready, really.
Sorry, man. I scuppered it.
You know, sometimes I just have, you know, I'm in the mood where I have something I'm really obsessed with and I really want to show it and get feedback and whatever. And sometimes I'm just grasping at straws here.
Yeah, but it raises, that question is such a good question, because it's, it reminds me of like it's like an early philosophical question of like Platonic ideals. I think I said Platonic ideal earlier. I'm not only thinking about Greek philosophers, but like this idea that there must be some sort of perfect form of something, like a triangle or whatever. Mm-hmm. And clearly, like with sound recording and stuff like this, which is, you know, we're in such an abstract medium, you know. I mean, sound's got to be the most abstract medium, I would imagine. Particularly when you're not using some sort of normative device like a violin, you know, something that's escaping from an instrument. But yet there is a discussion around what is like a perfect mix, or what is adequate mixing, which assumes, not unlike the Greek philosophers, some sort of ideal approach to something. But you know, all throughout the 20th century, people started to refute that idea, and like, what came first, and like, what is self, and what is a Platonic ideal like a real thing, you know? And so those are, that very conversation is something that torments us to today, both from a philosophical standpoint, from a political standpoint, and certainly from a sound standpoint, because you know, is the idea, like you were mentioning before, like listening in, can't you do that? Why is like listening in considered to be like a no-no regarding a lot of mixes? And
why is it bad if something masks something else? Like, do I have a serious issue with that? Is it like, oh, you're somehow losing headroom? It's like, shut up for a second. Like, are you having a problem with the way this actually sounds? You know, and I realized that I used to really have a problem where it is true that I would think that there was a Platonic ideal somehow, you know, and it's this notion of, are you creating something or are you discovering something? And I like the notion that creation is in a way just discovering something or revealing something.
Yeah.
But you can take that too far and actually fool yourself into thinking there's a correct mix. Now there might be, right? You might be so inspired or so clear on your intention that there really is a correct mix, and did this get what you wanted to communicate? Is it being communicated? But there's so often I feel as if what is correct is something that's outside me, like someone else could tell me if it's correct, and that can't be true. That can't be so. Like, it's either what I wanted or it isn't, and either it's communicating with people or it's not. Like, what other criteria do I think there is? You know, and in that way, it's the opposite of a Platonic triangle, right?
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good point. I mean, it was like reminding me of like something that like Bertrand Russell, who's like another philosopher. Sorry to go into like philosophy, but you know, it's like he at the end of his like big tome about like Western philosophy, like he talks about how, well, you know, like determinism is a very logical philosophy. Like, it's very logical to think that there might be a right answer to this. To sound and to anything, right? You know, the problem with that is that it's a pretty depressing philosophy. You know, it's not one that really inspires life or, you know, makes you a happy person. So in some ways, like, we have to kind of like fight that deterministic viewpoint, that kind of idealistic viewpoint, and try and do something that's going to be like a more positive philosophy. Whether, you know, I'm trying to think of like, there's like another Greek philosopher who talks about like doing things that are like good for other people and good for yourself. Don't think about things in like highly dogmatic ways, like stoic ways. Like just try and do right, try and do the best you can, and in that way you're going to be living your best life. And I think when it comes to music, the kind of transposition of those kind of philosophical ideas to music is important too, because like in some ways, like for every piece of music there might be some ideal, you know what I mean? There might be,
I mean, it's definitely,
but that's not going to make that ideal is kind of not it's not as important really as the idea of like enjoying the process and kind of trying to convey the joy of you trying to convey that to other people, which may in some or in its end kind of not net the most ideal way of mixing something. But that's not, it's like, that's not what's ultimately important. What's ultimately important is like the joy of music, the joy of creating it, the joy of sharing that with somebody else. And so, yeah, it does beg the question, like, or it does like confront the question when people are like, well, I don't know if I'd leave that frequency open. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if I'd master, compress something that hard. It's like, well, that's not, you're kind of listening. You're not listening to the music then, really,
Right. The fact that you're thinking that means either my mix is so screwed up that it's making it impossible for you to hear the music, or you're just not connecting with the music and it wouldn't matter what my mix did, actually. Yeah. I always think about my favorite Lou Reed track is Guilty off The Raven. And nice. Coleman playing, sax and the vocals, and they're like, the sax is just as loud as the vocals, and it's playing so actively. And if you actually took a step back and thought about that mix, you'd be like, what the hell are you doing? There's no way you can have that sax that loud with all these words happening. And I love it. It just sounds great. It never even occurred to me how messed up that mix was. We messed up until I played the track for other people, and they're like, whoa, that's a crazy mixing decision. And I'm like, I don't know. It's just fun. It's like really
but the truth, but that's how he writes. I mean, dude, the fact that you've worked with Lou Reed is so cool, because Lou Reed is definitely the epitome of this exact discussion. I mean, like, I'm thinking of like other tracks in the Velvet Underground, like Candy Says, where like you can hear them cutting tape. Like, there's like a loop at the end of the middle section of that song where like it like stutters and the guitars begin again, and you're like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, that's not, no one would agree to that, now. And any, no, like the record label would be like, and no, we're not, that's wrong. That's definitely got to be fucking wrong. And yet it's so right. And then there's like unfortunately, there's like the other example of it where like somebody will like fuck everything, like be so like hipster about the whole entire thing that it becomes like such an active decision to make mistakes, and you're like, that's terrible too. It's like, you just can't play guitar, you know what I mean? Like, that's your problem.
It's such a huge distinction,
but if it's approached with some sort of sincerity and it's about the joy of music, which of course Lou Reed had, then you can't comment on things like that. That's not, and also furthermore, that's what's beautiful about those pieces, those strange choices.
But sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's that kind of. I mean, I'm sure you could go on about this like at length, stuff. But I mean, my impression of as a listener to Lou Reed is that it seems fearless. It seems. I mean, I was quite surprised actually when. I remember you saying to me once, Seth, that he actually could not understand why everything that he did wasn't a huge hit. Because it was like, I don't get it. Like, this should all be massive. You know what I mean? It's like, just people are just wrong. But I just thought, I was just really impressed by this kind of fearlessness of it, and this sort of kind of. I remember when it was the Metallica, Lou Reed Metallica thing, which was I listened to it a lot. I mean, you were on that when you saw it. You did. I think you did electronics on that.
And that was those same tracks we were talking about.
Yeah. So, but there were that I mean, that listening to that album was really like a kind of it was almost an experimental process, because there were certain tracks which immediately grabbed me. There were others where just like everything was just going, no, like no, like absolutely not. Like you don't, that does not go with that, you know. And then the time would go on, and then suddenly there would be less of those. You know, suddenly, you know, I'd kind of grown accustomed to think, okay, that's kind of, you know what I mean? So it was, and then I remember hearing something, I think you maybe told me that he said, unless I read it somewhere, that he said something about it took everyone 30 years to get Berlin. And it was like, so
really?
Fuck it. Wait 30 years and they'll love this. You know what I mean? Fuck you all.
I mean, that's absolutely true, because they were having him tour Berlin like 30 years later when it was a completely panned album.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And I just, and that really made me, I think there's something about that side of what he was doing, and, you know, stuff which you were involved in, where it was, that really made me think about the kind of subjectivity of it, you know, and where there's a sort of a formalism just gets kind of put in place. I mean, even with the big classical composers, I mean, it's like what percentage of their works actually ever get performed, you know what I mean?
Like a
There's like,
percentage, right?
yeah, you've got, it's just it's been, you know, the perfect form gets bestowed upon pieces of work, pieces of art, doesn't it? You know, it's like they're not consciously made, that at some point a vote is taken, and that's what, you know, and that one's elected as the masterpiece, you know, and that's, and so it shall be, you know. And it's like, and it's such a tiny fraction of those artists' output, and, you know, as you're saying, Bryan, you know, that has nothing to do with the joy and the process and all the things which, that, you know, those people's, you know, life and work is about, you know.
Right.
It's an external thing. It's like winning an award. It has nothing to do with the process. It's just that it's a thing right at the end of the line, you know, and it has nothing to do with the making of anything.
And I mean, I would add to that like the joy of making music really is all you have. You know, I mean, it really is all you got, because not unlike everything else in this life, I feel like in the past, this last decade of my life has been about tearing down mythology.
I really like that.
You know, the mythology of how people are successful, the mythology of the great piece of music, you know, the mythology of politics, the mythology of a country, the mythology of a nation, of religion, and
I couldn't agree more.
And when the truth of the matter is that the way things happen, you know, they're coincidence. There's random. There's being in the place at the right time. There's whatever, you know, and you can't control that. Like that is true. That's the crushing beat of determinism that you know, Bertrand Russell was trying to warn against. Like, you actually have no fucking power in that. Like, you know, the fact that you don't get hit by a car when you walk outside of your house should tell you so much. You know, like we're lucky to be here in any form. So all you really have is the joy of music, the joy, you know, the joy of the things that you believe in, the joy of the experiences you share with other people. So yeah, lose the mythology, you know, lose the dogma, you know, essentially.
I realized that over this weekend, or maybe it was last week.
Sorry, I'm eating, by the way.
No, man, go for it.
No,
I'm enjoying it vicariously, you know, like.
I realized that the past few years, I've actually been mourning my loss of mythology.
Yeah.
And that now I think I've come out the other side, and I feel so free. I think I have all these myths about a lot of the things that you're talking about what my work would look like if it was good, what my career would look like if it was good, what, you know, and then I went through a phase of having to let go of those things, and it's very painful for me.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like believing in Jesus or something. I'm serious.
Yeah,
it is. It's like, and then you're like, holy shit, is there no God? You know, you're like, and you're like,
there's a mourning period, and then like, for me now there's free. I feel this weight lifted off me of all of these ideas of what's supposed to be, and and all these options opening up.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's true beauty in that. There's true freedom. And then you realize how in fact how fucking dangerous and how fragile like love is. You know what I mean? And all these things, like, gosh, once you strip that shit away, you know, you're like, wow, this is actually really special. Just to be here on this stage right now, just to be here with these people and have the fucking stupid joy of playing piano. You know what I mean? Like, how lucky am I? Right. Really?
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of it's gratitude, and that's only something that I ever really learned in the past maybe year and a half or something, is to formally cultivate gratitude.
Yeah.
I actually had this huge regret that I didn't understand about that before, because there's so many things that I honestly really should have been so grateful for, and I would have enjoyed them 1,000 times more if I'd been able to understand the power of having gratitude.
Yeah.
You know, and I wish I could go back in time and tell me, like, be grateful, like, really enjoy this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
That's
be
true.
present for this. You know, this is not a stepping stone. Nothing in your life is a stepping stone.
Exactly. Nothing's a stepping. That's it. That's what's what. Like, this could be it. This is it. You're on the stone.
And in a sense, this is it, right? Because you're only ever in this, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe you don't have to beta block that moment. You know, maybe you could just enjoy it. It's true.
So, dude, I'm thinking you're gonna have your lessons pretty soon. Do you have like a bit of music to ride out on?
Me?
Bryan? Yeah.
I would say write out on the stuff that we're collaborating on.
Oh, okay. I think I sent you. Yeah, I sent you.
Opening.
Opening.
512.
Yeah, opening. Yeah. Okay. So.
All right.
So we just started a thing a few days ago, and this is some of that.
Fantastic. All right, I'm gonna play it.
Yeah, Bryan, nice one, man. It was really cool having you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.
Super fun.
Really great to meet you, man.
Yeah,
really,
great to meet you too.
We were talking about you while you were away, because that's funny. And but most of what I was saying was like, you're one of these people where I'm talking to you, and all I can think is 1,000 things that I wish I could have asked you. You know what I mean? One of these, it's such a wonderful conversation where it just made me want to think of more and more things. You know?
Well, I was going to say likewise, and we don't have to do it for the purpose of a podcast. we can just talk. And I'm sorry that I'm eating.
No, it's good.
But what is it? What you got there? Is that eggs?
It's just eggs, potato, and some sesame sourdough.
Right. I was thinking it looks like kind of fancy bread. Has that got something in it? Like a kind of
olive oil.
Olive oil.
Wouldn't it occur to me to put sesame with eggs?
Yeah, sesame. Well, it's a sesame sourdough. It's just bread. It's just toast. That must have sounded good. That's good Foley.
That's it. Yeah, that's how we're gonna open the thing up.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, well, have fun, guys.
you